Okay, so Theravada teachings are really quite good for the teacher to explain things because there are so many lists. There's the three signs of being, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the five hindrances, the five moral requirements, the Sila, the 10 wholesome actions, the 10 fetters, and the 10 perfections. So these are just things, usually I would say, well, in all these lists, it doesn't matter what comes first. Each thing has equal value. If we look at the Eightfold Path, the first one is Samadhi. But actually, Samadhi is not right understanding, is not more important than right effort or right action or right mindfulness, for example. But when it comes to the 10 perfections, I do think the first one usually on the list is dana. And I think this is maybe the only list where I do think that's the correct place for this, for dana. But first of all, we have to understand, like so much of our Dharma practice, we have to understand the subtlety of it, the nuance of it, because dana is usually translated as generosity. But what does that really mean? What does it really mean to us to be generous? We can give many things to many people, but what does it mean to be, what does the heart think about being generous? And so I saw somebody speaking about the 10 perfections just last week, perhaps, and he was saying that dana is always first on the list because it's the easiest. And this I really don't agree with. If it's a perfection, to perfect generosity, then it's not easier than anything else. So we have to look at, what is dana? Usually, as I say, it's translated as generosity or giving, and very often it's about money. That's why we have dana boxes in the Dharma hall and in temples and things, because it's a very practical thing to do, to share our money. But that's really what dana is. It's about sharing something. So if you have more than you need, then you can share it. And that's dana. So whether you're sharing money or material things, you see, it's very easy to give material things away if you don't want them, or if they're broken, or if they have no value in your life, or if you have too many. Well, there's no skill in that. You don't have to be a Buddha to do that. And the same with, money. If you have some money that you make a donation to something and you feel good about it, that's not really done. I mean, the other people benefit from it, of course they do, but it's not really the perfection of generosity. And the same with Dharma teachings. We can be generous with that, and you have to take a lot of care around this, but you can be generous with your spiritual understanding and give people talks when you're taking a coffee with someone, or tell them how they're living their life wrong and what they need to do is meditate and do this and do that and do something else. That's not really being generous. Even if what you're saying is, you think is for the welfare of someone else, it's not really being generous. So dana means to share the best part of ourselves without looking for anything back. And if it is money, good, people can benefit from that. But if it's not, it can be your time, your energy, just your smile. We have so much that we can offer. And if we offer it with, and here's what defines dana, if we can offer this without looking for something back, even something subtle like a thank you or any kind of acknowledgement, then that's dana. It doesn't have to be something big and dramatic. You don't have to give someone your car or something. You can do, but that's not the point. It's whether you can give something and then cut your attachment to it immediately. I know I've spoken about this many times in the Dharma hall. We call it pure giving, but that's what I'm speaking about, dana, pure giving, that we give something to someone else. So we say, here, this is for you. And then we add something to it. Like a parent, for example. I can remember, my father, this lovely, loving man, giving me something when I was a little boy and saying, here, this is for you. Now take care of it. So there's a condition applied to it. Well, what if I don't take care of it? Have I disappointed you? Suddenly there's something extra in it. It's not just given freely. Although I have to say, if we're parents or adults giving children things, we should encourage them to take care of something. Things are not always easily replaceable. But I really understood what dana is, or the cutting of attachment to a gift. I understood it when I was in India one time, and I had a friend, an Italian woman, and it was her birthday. It was in December, and it was her birthday, and she asked me, uh, I asked her, what did she want? Well, it's India, it's in Buddha Gaya, there's not a huge variety. But she'd seen something in the town, which was just a few rupees, of course. You know, when we go to India, we're like millionaires. So it was just a few rupees. And it was like a little picture frame that opened into three aspects. And I suppose not very well made. But anyway, she said, oh, she'd like that for her birthday. So I bought it for her, and on her birthday, I gave it to her, and that was fine. She was very happy with that. And then sometime later, her money began to run out, and and she didn't want to take any from me. So what she wanted to do was to sell some things that she had. And she said, I'm going to gather all my things together and have a little market stand in the Burmese Vihar. You know, this was a wonderful place and a wonderful time to be in that place. The Burmese Vihar was very free and easy. And so that was her intention. So I went to collect her one evening. We were going to have dinner together. And she was in her room, and she had this pile of things on her bed, ready to be sold. But on the top was this picture frame that I bought for her birthday and given to her for her birthday. And I said, I saw it and I was a bit shocked. And I said, but you can't sell that. I gave it to you. And she looked at me with these really cold, steely eyes, and she said, yes, did you give it to me or not? And that's when I understood. I understood what pure giving is. It's when you cut your relationship and your attachment to the thing that you're giving, whether it's your time or your kind words or your Dharma teachings. That was another great lesson for me when I first started doing this, as you know very well, because my teacher instructed me to do it. I thought it was the most, and I still do, think it's the most wonderful thing in the world, this practice of love and awareness, and then with this background of, in my case, of Buddhism, of Theravada Buddhism, I just thought it was wonderful. And to bring this to the Isle of Man, we do this public, these 5-part courses of the meditation. And really, I thought this is the most beautiful and greatest thing in the world. Everyone should do it, really, because it is so wonderful. I just want to share it with you. Everyone should do it. But what I realized was, and very quickly, I'm happy to say, was that not everyone felt that way. So people came because they were curious. Buddhism was so new on the Isle of Man then. So people came because they were just curious. What is this strange thing? And who is this Manx person who's become a Buddhist? And so, so the first week there were maybe like 30 people, which is a huge amount of people on the Isle of Man. But the second week, there were maybe 25 people, and the third week, 18 people, and so on. So the first, of course, the doubts come in. Is it me? Am I doing something wrong? Am I not explaining it properly? But in humility, I didn't think it was that. But what I recognized was it's not for everyone. So then my relationship with other people is, well, I'm sharing this with you. I'm not giving you a lecture. I'm not giving you a teaching. I'm just sharing this with you. This is the thing that I love more than anything else. And I think the benefits it has brought to my life are beyond limits, beyond limitations. So I'm sharing it with you. And it is for you to accept or reject as you like. So my Dhamma is my Dana also. So I just share it with you. But then it's cut. I'm not going to come to your home, or I'm not going to telephone you in the morning and say, are you still doing your practice? Are you still sitting every day? This is for you to know for yourself. I make myself available for you and for all students at least. I make myself available. And if I can help you, I will. But even if I help you, I'm not looking for something back. And, even that simple acknowledgement of, oh, thank you so much. I really am not looking for that either. So dana is not first on the list because it's the easiest. It's not the easiest, but it is the most precious, because when you come to this place of sharing the best part of you, you're engaged in love. you're engaged in the fearless state. Dana has no fear, and there's no, I'll give you this, but I want something back. I want you to acknowledge me, I want to thank you, or I want you to cherish it forever. Like, this the idea that our parents or in-laws give us a gift that we really hate. And so every time they come to the house, we have to put it back on the mantelpiece. Otherwise, it lives in a box under the stairs somewhere. So nothing like that. So the Buddha said so many wonderful things, but things that are everything he said, that everything that is attributed to him is relevant for our 21st century lives. Buddhism, Buddha Dhamma, is not locked in the past 2,600 years ago. Greed, hatred, and delusion are not different now than they were then. Only the objects of those things might be different. But nevertheless, the feelings that we have, these movements of mind, these attachments, and these fear-based aversions and hatred itself, they're still as prevalent in the world as they ever were. So he said, never hesitate to do good. It's so beautiful. Never hesitate to do good. We live in a world where we, as individuals here today, have so much potential to be an influence for good in the world, to see people who have less than us, people in the street, and to support them in some way, to give them some food or even some money. I don't even know how we live in a society, a 21st century society, where people are in the street, where people are homeless in winter conditions like this. I think it's kind of shameful, really. But if we can help, we should help. So the Buddha said, never hesitate to do good, because in that hesitation, the Mara mind creeps in. And it will give you all the very valid reasons why you shouldn't help, why you need your money more than this person with nothing does, or why you should not waste your time on this person because, well, if I give this person money in the street, for example, well, maybe they'll just go and buy drugs with it. Well, that's what they're doing. What you're doing is offering support to someone. What they do with that support, again, you have to cut your relationship to that money. Not, here's 10 euros, make sure you buy a sandwich with it and a cup of coffee or something. So here, this is for you. I'm sharing this. I have the good fortune to be able to give you some money. So never hesitate to do good, because in that moment of hesitation, all the reasons why you shouldn't do it come forward, and you can easily be overwhelmed by those. So I've told this story before, but anyway, here it is again. Because when I look at my life, I do see it as this endless stream of blessings, or perhaps just one long blessing, where the Dharma, the truth, the reality of life was shown to me, that not everybody feels the same way I do about Dharma. Okay, that's true. So once I understand that, then I'm not under pressure to impress people or to convince them that they should follow my way. I don't mind what you do. And then this particular incident where I noticed that Mara mind creeping in. So I lived on the Isle of Man, and a friend gave me a little Buddha, little ceramic, I think it was Chinese, with gold leaf on it, very nice. And I took it to the Buddhist group where I was the teacher, and I took it there just to show them, look what somebody gave to me, isn't it lovely? And that's pretty much what I did. And then it was sitting here next to me. The big Buddha was here. This little one was sitting here next to me. At the group was a woman that I didn't like. I'd known her for some time, and I didn't have any bad feeling for her. I just didn't like her. We just didn't connect. But I knew she was having a really difficult time in her life. She didn't have very much money, and I think there was something wrong with her apartment, and she was quite lonely. And I knew that. I knew all of that. I just didn't like her. But I had a compassion at the same time. So I had this Buddha next to me, and I thought, okay, so now we do the meditation, as we would ordinarily do. So we began the meditation. But in the meditation, the thought came to me, I should give this little Buddha, I have so many of them, so many Buddhas in our house now, but I had so many then, and I thought I should give it to her. I should give it to her as a gesture for her to know she's not alone. I mean, obviously, the mind state, she's completely alone, but socially, she's not alone. There are people who recognize that she has some difficulty, and I thought, well, if she takes this little Buddha statue and puts it on her mantelpiece or on a shelf where she can see it, every time she walks past it, she'll know, ah, yes, there are people who have a concern for my life. And I thought, yes, that's what I'm going to do. So the meditation continued, and then Mara came to join me and sat down next to me and began to whisper in my ear, well, you're not going to give her this. You don't even like her. She couldn't appreciate this. Better if you keep it. At least you know what the Buddha is supposed to represent. And so on and so on. And it was all quite reasonable. Mara is always reasonable. He or she, however you see this being, is never screaming and shouting and jumping up and down. Never violent, but quite reasonable. That's why he's so difficult to resist, because he's quite reasonable. And I didn't resist. I listened to Mara, and when the meditation ended, I was just sat there and took this book and just pushed it back a little bit and took it home with me. But it was a great lesson for me, because later when I reflected, I thought, what did I do? I could have given her this. But anyway, I did give it away at a later time. So dana is this top of the list because it belongs to the fearless state. And it belongs to the state of non-judgment. It's not that we are looking at people saying, well, you're worthy of something and you're not worthy, and you're worthy and you're not worthy, etc., etc. We have something we can share, whether it's something material or something emotional or something just, like a smile. I was out walking some days ago, as I walk every day, and two people were jogging towards me. I guess, well, from my age, they were young people, and the woman, I kind of knew the man by sight, and in France, of course, very often we just say hello to each other as we pass. But this woman ran past me and said bonjour as she ran past, and gave the most beautiful smile. That was a real gift, because then suddenly I felt that smile, and then I'm smiling walking down the road doing my chanting and all the things that I do when I'm walking. It's very nice. So it doesn't take, dana is not something special. It's not that you have to go to monks and nuns and give them your life and give them your car and give them all your money. It's not anything like that. So a long, long time ago, when I was living on the Isle of Man, a friend of mine came to stay with me, a friend from Israel came to stay with me. So we had a nice time together, and then I took him to the boat for him to begin his journey back to Israel. I took him to the boat in the morning, and the boat, I think, left at 8 o'clock, something like that, and I began work at 9 o'clock. So I was very close to my work in town. We have this, the town where I was born, actually, called Douglas. And so I thought, well, I'll go and get a coffee. Well, it wasn't coffee like we have now. It wasn't Italian-style coffee. It was powdered coffee. And sometimes it had bubbles on the top, which people call frothy coffee. Cappuccino didn't exist, the idea of cappuccino. But I went in to this long cafe. It was quite long and narrow. And I went to the counter, and I was going to order coffee and toast, just for a breakfast. And so when I got to the counter, there was nobody there. And then suddenly, from working down underneath the counter, this really most beautiful young woman stood up and with the most gorgeous smile said to me, hello, how are you? What can I get for you? And I said, well, I have coffee and some toast, please. And so she said, okay. So she made the coffee and said, you go and sit down. She was like 18 or something, and I'm in my 40s. But she was just so lovely. And she said, so you go and sit down, and I'll bring your toast over to you. And that's nothing, is it? Really, somebody being polite to you. But it's like 30 years later, I'm still telling this story of how a young woman smiled at me and the influence that smile had. And she wasn't looking for a tip or something like that. It was just part of her way to give dana, the dana of service, of good, kind, beautiful, and polite, friendly service. So dana is not the easiest. It's not the first because it's the easiest, because it means to cut your attachment to something, to your behavior. It means to break your attachment to the idea that you will get something back from your behavior or from your gift. And in Buddhism, they have it, but they talk about making merit. One of the lists I mentioned at the beginning was the 10 wholesome actions. And that was a talk given to me by my teacher many, many years ago, and became the foundation of the first book that I ever wrote, called, I think now it's called Walking the Path, what it means to be a Buddhist. But that's in there. And part of the 10 wholesome actions is making merit, which is to do things. It's really about karma and about kusala karma, wholesome karma, that you do something that will give you a good feeling in the future. So you're building up like a bank balance of good feelings or of good deeds that you've done that when you die will take you to a good rebirth. Okay, I don't want to say anything about that, but nevertheless, that's not pure giving, because you're doing it with some intention. Well, I'm doing this now, but wait till my next rebirth. I'll be a king or a queen or a rock star or something. So it's not pure giving. Dana is much more. It's much bigger, and then at the same time more subtle and more nuanced than we think it is. So on retreats and things, we have the Dana box, and the idea of it is very, very simple. It is to, on the one hand, show the appreciation for the Dharma, and then making a support, so the Dharma can continue. It's got nothing to do with, well, that's why it's all discreet. We don't have people walk into the Dharma box with 50 euros. we don't have this. It's discreet because it's a personal thing. When I would go to my teacher, it was so hard for me. I had to have 3 jobs to get to the monastery, and then I would sit and then I would leave something in the Dharma. Now, by comparison to other people, it would not be very much, but in my life, it was a huge amount. And it was like the Bible story of, it's called the widow's mite, where she didn't have any money, and she gave the last tiniest coin that she had. And Jesus said, well, that's worth more than all the rich people putting in some of their money. So Dana is everything for me, and it really deserves and merits the first place on the list. So work hard at understanding what Dana is. For you people, I don't think you have a big problem with this at all. But just to understand, it's not just giving money, it's not just giving a gift, it is giving it with a pure heart from the fearless state. All right. So the next one is Sila, is morality. So I speak about this often because I think as I get older, I see more and more the importance of continually reminding people how important a moral lifestyle is. So in Buddhism, because it's so beautiful, the Buddha was asked, well, when people come to train with you, what do you do? He said, well, I tell them what they should do. And that's it. And then the story goes on, I know you know, but he said this question, and said, well, if they don't do that, what do you do? He said, well, I tell them what they should not do. And if they don't follow that, he said, well, then they have to leave. So that's it. So the Buddha, in his greatness, as this wonderful teacher, as my teacher, he was a gentle, loving, kind man. But if you went to the monastery, you went to do the work that the monastery provides the environment for. So if I travel all the way from the Isle of Man, and it was an 11-hour journey, and boats and trains and cars and buses, it was a long way. It was a big effort. But once I arrived in the monastery, if my idea was, well, I'll just sleep, I'll just lie, I'm not getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, it's too early, I'll just have a lie in bed. No one will notice because we always notice. Even he, in his love and his gentleness, would say, but you came here. He never said this to me because I always went with the right intention, but you came here to do this, otherwise, why are you here? So then he would, whenever he would speak about morality, it's because, well, if you want to be on the Dharma path, this is the first part of it. This is really the foundation. How you live in the world determines exactly what you're going to meet in your meditation. And the meditation is the cornerstone of our practice. Cease to do evil, learn to do good, and purify your own mind. You can't purify the mind of anyone else, but how do you purify your own mind? It's not through guilt and shame and scrubbing away, trying to get the stains out. It's just recognizing, there are so many things that I do which are related directly to self, to me, that I want, I need, I must have, and so on and so on. Every little difficulty you have in your life comes back to this grasping at a self-identity. All of them do that. This is why the teaching of the Buddha of anatta, of the emptiness of a permanent self, is so important to understand. Now, notice I didn't say the teaching of no self. That's a real misunderstanding of it. When you understand it completely, you can speak like this. But if you're speaking to people who don't understand it, then you get caught up in this argument. There is no self. Well, who's speaking like this? Who was just offended? Who has to get up and go to work tomorrow? Who has to take responsibility for their family? If you're saying there's no self. So that's not what the Buddha said. He said there's no permanent or fixed self. So all of you are beings in flux. You're moving all the time. Right now in this relationship, you are students, let's say, or disciples. When you go, if you go home and you have your partner, you become the wife or the husband or the partner or the friend or the parent. So there's nothing static about it. So there's just this flowing. So when we come to our meditation practice, what we're meeting are all the things that we have empowered in our life. And if we're just following the mind, who knows where it will take us? Mara is there, always there, saying, go on, do it, go on, push this old woman out of the way, you'll get a better seat. And something like that. But that's just the voice of Mara, which means I want something better than, I don't want to wait in line behind this old woman. It's like when you're in the supermarket, well, certainly in France it's like this. People get to the caisse where they have to pay, and then take all their shopping and they put it in their bag, and then the woman says, it's 30 euros. My purse is right at the bottom of my bag and I have to go down for it. You're standing there and the mind's going, come on, is this the first time you've been in a supermarket? Oh, come on, I've only got 3 things I want to get home. And then this old lady looks at you and says, I'm so sorry for the delay. It's quite fine. And Mara is whispering in your ear all the time. You can act on that or not. So to save us from ourselves, we have these 5 simple moral requirements. Cease to do evil, learn to do good, purify your own mind. Cease to do evil are the moral requirements. Stop behaving in a way that does not bring happiness to you or to others. So the Buddha says, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm advising you that if you want the best, this is what you should be empowering. And so the first one is, as we say it in English or in Pali, I undertake the rule of training. So it's not like a commandment from God. It's not something literally written in stone. They are, I can't say they're suggestions, but it's advice from an awakened being. If you want to be happy in your life, this is what you have to do. Live a life that has value. I undertake the rule of training to refrain from harming living beings or any living beings. Well, that rule itself, when we first hear it, maybe we think, well, I don't want to harm anything. Maybe you do feel that. But that rule is so powerful that if the whole world just took that one rule, then all wars and violence and rape and abuse just finish immediately. Just by one, it's just one rule. That's how close, liberation is to us. It's just like one heartbeat away, one rule away. I undertake the rule of training. So first of all, it's very broad. I undertake the rule of training not to harm any living beings. Okay, well, I don't harm any living beings. Yeah, but I do use, I don't know, poisons in the garden perhaps. I don't know what to kill the ants when they come in the house. I eat meat, so someone's killing on my behalf, and so on and so on. And then you begin to reflect, and your understanding then becomes, this word I've been using a lot, but becomes more nuanced, more subtle. You begin to see there is a way to live that I want to be part of, where at least consciously I'm committing as little harm as possible to myself and to any beings that I share my life with, and the planet itself, of course. The next one is, so that's I undertake the rule of training to refrain from harming any living beings. The next one is, I undertake the rule of training to refrain from taking anything that has not been freely offered to me. So this again is really important. It encourages patience, for example. You may see it in American movies. I don't think German people do it. I don't think British people do it. But you would go to somebody else's house in their kitchen and immediately walk to the fridge and open it and take something out, take a bottle of lemonade out and start to drink it. I don't know anyone who would do that. You're given at some point, please treat this like your own home. Everything here is for you. Take what you want. Okay, but until these things are freely offered, that we don't do it. So we cultivate this sense of patience, of patiently waiting for someone to show their kindness to us. I undertake the rule of training not to take anything that has not been freely offered. So there's no manipulation in that. We're looking at someone and saying, well, that's a really nice pullover, that would probably fit me, but I don't have something, and I can be very cold. And this manipulation thing, which is obviously awful. I mean, obviously it's awful. And then the next one, so we're not involved in trying to manipulate others for them to give us something that they don't really want to give us. That we're just waiting for their heart to manifest, to show itself. I mean, sometimes in real life, sometimes we have to ask, could I have something to eat? We may have to ask for that. But it's not to take it without some kind of consent and some kind of relationship. The next one is, it started like this. When I was training, this was the rule. It didn't go any further than this. I undertake the rule of training to refrain from sexual misconduct. So sexual misconduct, it just means not being fidel to your partner. That's pretty much all it means. Although we could extend that into, the idea of what is appropriate behavior. I suppose my very, very first Buddhist teacher was a man who I knew him through his books, first of all, but then I actually met him later. It was a monk called Hamalawa Saratissa. And in a talk he gave one time, he said, I thought it was really beautiful, really. He said, he was talking about sexual misconduct. And he said, it's not marriage that makes sex acceptable. It's respect and consideration and love for each other. That's what makes it acceptable. Not just, well, we're married, so I can do anything I want to you or with you. It's not that. It's having this respect. So that was how it was always taught when I was training, nearly 50 years ago. But then over time it began to expand. It became, I undertake the rule of training not to use or abuse other people. So it's connected, of course, but not to use or abuse other people. So if you have a position of authority, it's not to exploit the people, lower than you. It's not to take advantage of them because they don't have the opportunities that you have. It is to be fair with people. And implied in all these precepts, this pancha sila, implied in these precepts is always the opposite. So I'm not going to harm any other beings, but I'm going to help if I can. I'm not going to steal or take something that's not mine, but I'm going to share what I have, which is dana again. I'm not going to exploit or manipulate others, but I'm going to, protect them if I'm able. I'm going to be going to use my powers for good, like any good superhero. I'm going to use my powers for good and not for for taking advantage of others. So the next one is speech, and this is of course really important. How we speak, how we relate to other people. There are sort of two kinds of speech. One is when we actually say something, and the other is when we don't say anything, when we're silent. So in a Buddhist context, and certainly in the suttas and things like the Dhammapada with all the stories that we looked at, to give agreement to something was to stay in silence. So if somebody asked the Buddha, is it all right if I film you doing this? And the Buddha would just stay quiet. And that means yes. And same with all the monks. So that's resting in silence. Sometimes it's not good to say anything. People can get very involved in political situations and world situations. Well, I don't have anything to say about these things. Yes, it's awful what's happening in the world. Of course, it's awful. People hurting each other and animals being hurt. The innocence of animals suddenly being involved in war stories. So all of this is awful. But how does sitting around a table talking about it really help the situation? So better if I just stay quiet. Really, that's what I feel about it. But if I do have to speak about something, then to use my speech in a way that is about bringing peace or harmony or uniting a group together and not setting one group against another. We're not talking about how wrong the Christians are or the Muslims or the Hindus and only Buddhist people have the right. And this is nonsense to speak in this way. It doesn't matter what label you give yourself. What determines your value, I suppose, in the world is your behavior, is whether you do help and serve and take care of your family, and then to a larger extent your community, and then all the beings that you have any kind of responsibility toward, that you just take care of them, not because you're doing something, but because it's dana. This is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to, I probably shouldn't say we're supposed to, but it's the opportunity we have to take care of each other. But we don't always do it, of course, because we feel tired or we're lazy or it's too much trouble. Okay, but then we miss something. We miss the opportunity. And the same when we have to speak, it's not to say something that's hurtful and cutting and cruel. I mean, that's what the precept says. I undertake the rule of training to refrain from wrong speech or from harmful speech, speech that is, offensive or insulting. And even though we might live in a world where that happens a lot, and on social media it happens a lot, I understand I'm not really connected to very much social media. But the Dharma training is, well, I'm not going to let your behavior determine mine. Because you are being cold and unkind, I'm not going to do that. I have no influence on any of you. So your behavior, it comes from you, it doesn't come from me. And my behavior comes from me, it doesn't come from you. So once we understand that, then we can really engage in this very, very important aspect of self-responsibility. So wrong speech. I undertake the rule of training to refrain from wrong speech, from using my speech in cruel and harmful ways. And that's a big skill. Many people come to me and say, well, what more can I do in my Dharma practice? And my answer is, cultivate right speech. Knowing when to speak, when to stay silent, and how to say something that's not going to feel offensive. You can't offend anyone. We have to understand this. You can't offend anyone, and no one can offend you, but you can always feel offended, because that's something coming from you. But really the world is just existing. The universe is just existing. None of it's about you. You just make it about you. And your association with other people, it's not about you, but you just make it about you. And based on that, you can be standing with two friends and somebody else comes along and you're all speaking for a moment, and then this other person goes away and the three of you are left. And one said, "Do you hear what she said? Did you hear what she said to me?" And the other two saying, "No, what?" She said, she didn't say that, or she didn't mean that, or whatever it was. That we can take offense at anything. It's like the man looking out of his bedroom window at night and saw a kind of youths stealing his gate from his garden. And his wife said, "Why didn't you say anything?" He said, "Well, I didn't want them to take offense." So the last one. So the last one. I undertake the rule of training to refrain from taking drugs that alter the consciousness. So I had a big difficulty with this, not that I was taking drugs, but I was taking medication because I had an ulcer. And so I didn't realize that it didn't mean medicine, because we have the same word. Drugs is not French is medication. So in English, it's just drugs, anything you put in your body to heal it or to have other effects. I didn't know, but so certainly we can take medicines, and when you come on retreat, we don't mind if you're taking medicine, but we do ask that you tell us so we know in case something happens. It was certainly like this in India. There was one particular brand of anti-mosquito tablets that you could take. It was, for some people, it was quite dangerous. So we kind of had to know. So what the precept is really speaking about is mind-altering drugs, although everything alters the condition of the mind. Everything, the food you eat, the tea or the coffee that you drink, the company that you keep, it's all having an influence on the mind, of course. But if you're taking things like marijuana and LSD and heroin and cocaine, that's all I know. You're doing that deliberately to alter something. Whereas our relationship with the mind is to have it as clear as possible so we can see it. Cease to do evil, learn to do good, and purify the mind. So to purify the mind, we have to see it. And that's what our vipassana is. Now, we don't see anything. That's not the point of it. We're not seeing thoughts moving up. And this is just a way to speak. Thoughts moving like clouds passing through a clear blue sky. Very nice. That's not what you're experiencing at all. You are experiencing the thinking part. You're not seeing it, you're experiencing it. And as the awareness becomes stronger, then you're experiencing it at the point where it conditions sensation in the body. It's all very beautiful. But to do that, we have to have the mind clear. You're not going to come into the Dharma hall, having just smoked a marijuana joint or whatever they call them now, and expect the meditation is going to be good. It might feel comfortable, but it's not going to be useful for you. It might feel, I have no idea what it would feel like, but it might feel comfortable. So we have to really not confuse what our meditation, what vipassana really is. It's not to get something, it's not to have a great cloud floating experience or to see colors. It's to be with the mind as it moves. And through that simple being and the cultivation of awareness, that we can see the mind and the habitual parts of it, the bahula, it's called bahula karma. We can see the bahula karma. And there's a point we say, oh yeah, I always do that. In this kind of situation, I always do that. I'm always the one who jumps up and starts to do something in the house, or I'm always the one who wants to serve everyone else first and then I don't get anything. You begin to see your own nature. Now, there's nothing wrong with any of those things, except they become a habit, and so you become blind to them. So we have the meditation where you can begin to see, this may not be necessary, it may not be the best thing to do all the time. So we're looking at ourselves, and to see that, then we have to stop polluting the mind. You know, there are so many things. I already said that everything we experience has an influence on the mind. Everything. Whether we're hot or cold, we're full of food, or we're hungry, or we want a cup of tea, or whatever. That's all having an influence on the mind. Sitting here listening to this has an influence on the mind. All of it. You know, and we have this access, I suppose, you know, to drugs, including alcohol, nicotine. I'm not sure how big an influence that has on the mind, but alcohol, certainly we know it has a big influence. And then these other drugs that I mentioned, and then, you know, we have these mushrooms. You know, mushrooms, they just grow in nature. And I just was thinking a while ago about how grateful we should be that someone back in history tested all these mushrooms and say, well, this one we can eat, this one, whoa, sends you into a heaven realm, and this one killed George immediately. So, you know, somebody did that for us, so we don't have to, be confused by these things. So we keep the mind as clear as we can. And with this loving kindness practice and with our awareness practice. So Sila is the foundation of our Dharma life. It's how we live in the world. It's divided into three aspects of Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Sila means morality. Why is it important? Well, because first of all, it makes your presence on the planet a blessing to other people because you're kind. Just at that superficial level, you're kind and you're caring and you're generous and whatever else. You may not be enlightened, but you're nice to be around. But more than that, from our Dharma perspective, is that how you live is what you meet in the Dharma hall. That's it. You're meeting you. You're not meeting someone else. You're not meeting some special moments of mind. You're meeting you. And if you are an unkind, unpleasant person, you can't avoid meeting that when you come to the Dharma hall. That's why we don't have unkind, unpleasant people very often. We don't have criminals and gangsters coming to do meditation. Simply because the moment we stop, which is really what our meditation is, just stop and like this, then all the things that you empower in your life become present, become fully present in the mind, and you can speak like this, but you can see them and know them and let them go. Or you can be overwhelmed by them. Think, I can't do this. I can't bear to see these things. I need to go and have another cigarette, another glass of whiskey, or whatever. I need to block them out, which of course is not our way. Our way is to purify the mind by seeing its nature and then to let go and let go and let go. So this, as a perfection, is something really to take into account. It doesn't mean you have to be religious. It doesn't mean anything like that. It doesn't mean that you have to make a show of your morality. You just ultimately have to be kind. In the end, everything comes down to kindness, I think, as we live in the world. We have many stories about, great, wonderful masters and teachers. But the thing that we remember really is their kindness. Their kindness that they shared their understanding with us, at least that. Their kindness when they helped, their kindness when they offered us or gave us their time. I think that is how I remember my teacher, the kindness of him. The very first retreat I did, I couldn't get home on the Sunday because I had to take a boat and the boat's not till the next morning. So he said, well, you stay here overnight. And tomorrow I'll take you to the station. This is my teacher. And I said, oh, okay. So I just thought, well, I'll just sit here all night by myself in this little room, and they gave me a mattress upstairs. But no, he came down and sat next to me, and because I was alone in the monastery then, except for him, so it was just the two of us, and he came and sat next to me and took care of me, like a loving father. And he said, so do you have any books, any Dharma books? I said, well, some is here. All these beautiful, free issue Dharma books. I don't know. I mean, I had this connection with him immediately. But I think it was around these things. What he displayed is what my heart was yearning for. That kind of kindness and that generosity, that dana, And then that, that beautiful morality, I was with him for 22 years. His morality was perfect. He said to me one time, so I'll finish with this now, but he said to me about the importance of Sila, about the importance of morality. And he said, so he's a Buddhist monk, Theravada Sayadaw, and he said, if my morality, he was talking about himself, if my morality is not pure, why should people support me? So beautiful. That's his responsibility. When I would go and do my retreats, I would leave behind my wife and 2 small children. So I didn't go there to sleep. I did there to do, because of Fiona's grace, that I could go to a retreat. I didn't go there to waste time. And I, could put my hands together and say, thank you, Fiona, for taking care of our children alone, which is not so easy. I mean, she had help with her mother, but nevertheless, she was alone with them. So when I get to the monastery, I just do, as it turned out, more than the program said, but nevertheless, I did that. And my teacher, as he said, if my morality is not pure, why would people support me? So he became the inspiration for me very, very quickly. Because of those simple things. If you want to be happy in your life, you have to cultivate a loving heart. Ding, first thing. If you want to be, if my morality isn't pure, why would people support me? Ding, another one. And over 22 years, it was always like this. I never saw him break his moral code ever, not even slightly. And he always gave, from my point of view, the best of himself. And then, of course, my relationship with him is, as he became older, was to be more generous, coming from my side, to take greater care of him. When I met him in India, and we sat together in the morning sun, and I put this blanket around his shoulders, and he was like my grandfather, who I never had actually, but he was like my idea of my grandfather, and that I could take care of him for nothing in return, because it was just my pleasure when I would serve him breakfast. It was a privilege. I always felt that it was a privilege to serve him. So anyway, this is morality, that we can bring something beautiful to the world by these simple training rules of not to harm other beings, not to take anything that hasn't been joyfully or honestly given to us, not to use our influence to control or manipulate others, not to use our speech in cruel or harmful ways, and not to do things that deliberately obscure the clarity of the mind. And so this is the perfection of Sila, the Sila Paramiya. Okay, so I think we'll finish there for now. So then I offer this to you this morning for your consideration, your reflection, and may you be well and happy.